1989 was the era where Taylor Swift was truly inescapable. During that period in time, you either hated her or loved her, because it was her era of oversaturation. With the inclusion of it being a massive era in sales, it remains up until this point the pinnacle of Taylor Swift's commercial career, and where she came into full pop icon status. It was also the biggest crossover album of the past decade, even though some people like to give her flack for that title, because some people don't think she was true country in the first place, whatever that's supposed to mean. Like, do you expect country music to still sound like a Johnny Cash record from the 60s? If so, you are delusional. Music genres progress and change with time, so yes, 1989 was the biggest crossover album of the past decade. Taylor Swift is still one of the leaders of the music industry present day. She's an amazingly influential figure, but 1989 helped elevate that influence to astronomical levels. Taylor Swift's music career effectively began in 2006 with the release of her self-titled debut album. The album was a sleeper hit and most notable for simply being an introduction to Taylor. It doesn't have that many distinctive qualities about it. It is obviously more youth-focused since she was only 16 years old when this album was released. But unlike her peers or people her age in the music industry, she wrote all of the songs on her debut album, with barely any help at that. And that album was the beginning of Taylor also getting recognized for her songwriting skills. 2008's Fearless was Taylor's major breakthrough album. It's like her first album reprised, but it's strengthened. It has better songs, better writing, and great storytelling. Speak Now has even better writing, with an edgier soundscape. And Red was the precursor to her full dive into pop. Red was a blend of many different genres. The title track is a country pop track. The vocal effects during the chorus add a modern feel to a rather traditional country pop song. We Are Never Ever Getting Back Together is classic Taylor fare, but with a huge Max Martin pop chorus, and the cheeky anthem that is 22 follows the same footsteps. I Knew You Were Trouble was a leap into dubstep and one of her first songs to have such a mass appeal to pop radio and charts, which would eventually lead us to 1989. Through the accumulation of the albums she created, she gained a reputation for writing songs about her ex-boyfriends, which she did. She wrote a ton of songs about her ex-boyfriends and current boyfriends. But you know what? Ed Sheeran, The Weeknd, Bruno Mars, Justin Bieber, Shawn Mendes, Justin Timberlake, and Drake, just to name a few male artists who also write about their past lovers, a ton. But Taylor got a lot of misogynistic comments about her subject matter within her songwriting, and it sort of became this media joke that ran on far too long. She was slut-shamed for dating around, even though it's completely normal for young men and women to date multiple people and to gain experience, and she was constantly criticized for writing about those experiences. 1989 was the ultimate power move. She said, you know what? I'm going to take the narrative the media constantly throws at me, I'm going to play into those narratives in an exaggerated manner since they think I actually act like this, and then I'm going to take control over that narrative so you can't use it against me. And guess what? While we're at it, I'm going to switch to pop music and you're going to hear the songs of me taking back the narratives you throw at me everywhere. You will not be able to escape them, the same way I couldn't escape those misogynistic comments at the beginning of my career. Yes, that is actually how I visualized Taylor's mindset during the 1989 era, at least with some of the singles, and those singles don't allude to me being far off. Shake It Off was the catalyst for the 1989 era, and is Taylor's biggest hit to date, being certified diamond in the US. Taylor spoke about her new style of music in an interview during its time of release. I've had every part of my life dissected, my choices, my actions, my words, my body, my style, my music. When you live your life under that kind of scrutiny, you can either let it break you, or you can get really good at dodging punches. And when one lands, you know how to deal with it. And I guess the way that I deal with it is to shake it off. I woke up every single day not wanting but needing to make a new style of music. This album is a rebirth for me. And rebirth it was. Shake It Off was her reintroduction to the world. The song itself even sounds like an event. The song starts like a high school cheer backed by a marching band and just eventually bursts into an earworm of a chorus. If Shake It Off was seen as Taylor sticking her foot into the water when it comes to facing the media, then Blank Space could be seen as a full dive into it. Blank Space is super satirical and plays up the crazy ex-girlfriend narrative that was applied to her. The music video for the song is simply one of her best and most memorable, where she continues to put on an act. The track went on to become the second #1 song on the album. 1989's singles also had some softer cuts like the slick 80s synth pop track Style. that recalls a lot of nostalgia that Taylor compares to a relationship. Wildest Dreams is a dream pop ballad that is probably the most atmospheric and cinematic single, but I'd be lying if I said I thought this album was completely flawless. And I think one of the major mishaps on this album is Bad Blood. It's whiny, it's annoying, and has some of her worst lyrics ever in a pop song. It's one of her most faceless singles, and at this point, the meaning behind the song is in pop culture's mainstay. The song is about her feud with Katy Perry. The song may not be my favorite, but it arguably has her best music video attached to it, a literal mini action film that features an all-star cast. But being that Bad Blood is one of her worst singles, and still became the third #1 single from this album, proving the power she withholds. This woman can power anything to the top spot, which is funny because during this era there was accidentally 8 seconds of static noise released under her name, and it went #1 on iTunes. That is mind-blowing. Aside from Bad Blood, the album did proceed with great singles like the ice-cold synth-pop anthem Out of the Woods, and the highly underrated New Romantics, which should have been a single sooner. It should not have been the song to close out the era. It also deserved an inclusion on the standard edition of 1989. One of my personal favorites off this album is Clean. I think it's one of her best ballads and is so well written, and is such an ambient song. 1989 had massive promotion, it was everywhere. So the commercial success of this album was one of the best within the past decade. It sold over 1.2 million copies in the first week and became the fastest selling album in over a decade. The album wasn't even available on streaming services when it was first released. It won a multitude of accolades, including Best Pop Vocal Album and controversially Album of the Year at the 2016 Grammy Awards. 1989 was and is still nothing like she's made before. It's a very sonically cohesive album. It's pure pop and takes inspiration from the indie stratosphere. With this album, she was America's sweetheart, and simultaneously the album became America's sole pop soundtrack during the duration of the album's cycle. 1989 is 100% the album that turned her into a global phenomenon. She was not Taylor Swift the country girl, she was just Taylor Swift. Not many artists have or will ever have an album as massive as 1989 attached to their discography. However, Taylor has had a handful of massively successful albums. 1989 is Taylor at her most pop, most commercial, but undoubtedly her most iconic. To this day, it stands as one of the single most important albums in her career. It's the perfect crossover album and sounds like it was engineered for mass consumption. But it's still very personable to Taylor Swift. She held back no restraints with her star power. Every music video and song had high gloss production. It cemented Taylor Swift as one of the leading women in music of this generation, and furthermore solidified her pop icon status.